Hello, my name's Ashley Jess Knight, and today I'm discussing my dissertation topic: Can secondhand influencers on Instagram change our consumption patterns? For my dissertation, I researched and evaluated the practices of secondhand influencers to see if they are able to make a difference to our consumption habits and environment. I decided to divide this into three main chapters of research: fashion promotion, secondhand cultures, and an autoethnographic case study of my own practice as a secondhand influencer on Instagram. Fashion promotion and influencers. Fashion has always been a social activity spread through word of mouth, observation, and interaction. German sociologist George Simmel proposed social copying, where trends develop through imitation of social needs, a desire to conform to prescribed trends, however allowing differentiation from people not following the trend. Fashion promotion evolved in 1770 with the publication of British Ladies magazine, introducing a new way to communicate trends, and this has later evolved into fashion magazines and online influencers. Fashion promotion. Before the introduction of the internet, fashion and trends were presented through industry gatekeepers consisting of a pre-selected elite group of fashion editors, collectors, buyers and celebrities. Due to consumers' lack of access to the industry, it was regimented and slower paced, with consumers more passive in accepting new trends. However, the introduction of the internet and social media allows brands to communicate directly with consumers, granting consumers real-time access to the fashion industry. This increases consumer participation and creates immediate demand for newer trends seen online, resulting in the creation and rise of fast fashion. The emergence of social media and the internet alongside blogging sites like Blogger and LiveJournal, launching in 1999, allowed the public to participate in the fashion industry like never before, enabling passionate fashion bloggers to be active participants within the fashion industry through collaborations and influencer roles. What are fashion influencers and micro-celebrities? Influencers create and interact with content in chosen niches on social media, considered a trusted voice by followers in that niche. Influencers often curate photos of fashionable ideals to look realistic to relate to consumers on social media, turning industry ideals into perceived norms, causing consumers to strive for unrealistic goals through the consumption of goods marketed to them. This is known as peer marketing, where influencers have consciously and unconsciously influenced consumers' purchase patterns rather than directly from a brand. A large part of being an influencer is creating a following and generating engagement. It is expected that the higher the rate of followers, the higher the engagement rate. However, not all influencers have a high following. This is potentially caused through targeting a smaller or newer niche, like secondhand clothing. However, they are still influencing consumers. The idea of micro-celebrities relates more to these type of influencers. In 2013, Marwick explains that to be a micro-celebrity, you must curate yourself and your social media as a celebrity figure, even without a large following, through creating a persona, producing content, and strategically appealing to online fans by being authentic. I then looked at Depop and Depop influencers. Depop is a social media app that allows users to upload images similarly to Instagram and present them in a virtual marketplace, allowing users to barter for clothing. Many Depop users take on the role of an influencer to boost sales in their online shops, transforming themselves into micro-celebrities, and is often used as a foundation to becoming an influencer on other social media sites such as Instagram and YouTube, consequently allowing more consumers to become Instagram famous and build a social media following through selling and curating themselves in secondhand clothing. This practice is often seen as unconsciously sustainable, as the clothing is sold as a way to make money and create fashion looks rather than the trading of secondhand clothing. And on the right, you have an example of my own practice as a secondhand influencer and my own personal Depop page. Secondhand cultures. Philosopher Andrew Brooks argues for as long as clothes have existed, they have been borrowed, exchanged and swapped. The needs and views of second-hand clothing are changing in the 20th century. In my previous research, I examined Hall and Broadbridge's identification of 3 types of second-hand consumers and their motivations to shop second-hand. These identifications were economic dependence, style-conscious consumers on a budget, and charity-conscious consumers. However, after my research into this topic, I would like to propose 2 more, through examining the changing trends of shopping through online stores and second-hand goods consumption. Firstly, I propose someone who buys second-hand clothing to sell online for profit on sites such as Depop and eBay. Furthermore, I propose a 5th consumer of second-hand goods, the sustainable consumer, who purchases second-hand goods with a sustainable motivation. The original purpose for charity shops were to help provide affordable goods to people in economic difficulties. However, this created a negative stereotype of charity shops and second-hand goods as undesirable and unhygienic. However, this view has recently started to change. Charity shopping has become more popular through professionalisation around the last 10 years, through paid and trained staff and managers, new goods, consistency in appearance, upkeep, and the quality of goods. It can be argued that charity shops have been marketed towards middle-class consumers with larger spending power, consequently changing the direction of charity shopping to fundraising rather than providing social and economic aid. Alongside gentrification and second-hand fashion trends in the last few years, this has influenced rising prices in charity shops as middle-class consumers are prepared and able to pay higher prices, generating a barrier to lower-class consumers who require second-hand clothing for economic reasons. However, the increasing popularity of second-hand shopping generates greater charity awareness and fundraising. Consuming second-hand clothing can be thought of as a sustainable method of purchasing clothes, as it does not use raw materials nor does it support unethical production and it reduces landfill waste. The popularity of this has arguably risen from recent environmental awareness through media with organisations such as Extinction Rebellion, who protest against the current global climate emergency. Instagram has played a crucial role in expanding XR, with their Instagram page reaching 400,000 followers in September 2019, which came only 14 months after their first Instagram post. This demonstrates social media's impact, enabling millions of people to view and exchange with Extinction Rebellion, who may otherwise have not been familiar with them, demonstrating that consumers are paying more attention to the impacts of their life choices and consumption habits. Second-hand influencers or educators. McNeil and Moore discuss social consumers who are interested in consuming sustainably. However, their interests and actions towards sustainable fashion are inconsistent due to perceived barriers to sustainable fashion, including price points and unawareness, alongside a lack of social acceptance. This highlights the examples of what second-hand influencers are trying to educate consumers on while promoting their second-hand styling. Influencers post second-hand clothing to promote awareness of second-hand items available, establishing social acceptance through growing a social network. Second-hand influencers often share the low-priced second-hand items, evidencing accessibility. This has created an online community interested in second-hand clothing, mainly for environmental and social reasons, alongside style choice. One way that they influence followers is through the social copying technique, showing second-hand goods finds to encourage their followers to shop second-hand and source low-cost second-hand goods as well. My practice as a second-hand fashion influencer. I started my second-hand influencer page in 2017 to share items I found second-hand. In 2018, I began sharing second-hand outfit pictures as I began to consume second-hand items for financial reasons, but for also style reasons to create individual looks. In 2019, I became more proactive about the environmental benefits of consuming second-hand clothing, promoting this through involvement in campaigns such as #SecondhandSeptember. Now, my second-hand influencer page promotes the information on the 3 main benefits of shopping second-hand: environmental, price, and style. The clothing in my Instagram feed, like other second-hand influencers, are mostly one-offs and say second-hand. This can be positive for second-hand influencers, as more consumers are shopping second-hand in order to find fashion statements and unique clothing to disassociate themselves from hyperconsumerism. Fast fashion is producing uniform looks and high streets consist of chain stores, causing difficulty in finding clothes of not one prescribed style, and limiting consumers' ability to express their individuality and identity through clothing. This ultimately causes clothing to become aesthetically impoverished, making fashion homogeneous and restricting consumers' individuality. Homogeneous fashion causes consumers to dispose of their clothes quickly due to little emotional connection as well as the lack of context or value associated with clothing. Brown discusses how second-hand clothing provides the new owner with a sense of history and understanding of the original owner, creating a sense of context and emotional value to the garment, potentially prolongs the garment's use. Second-hand influencers often discuss how they have sourced their clothes alongside detailing their own emotional connection to the clothing, which in turn encourages their audience to become more sentimental about their clothes and their value. To contrast the current fast fashion cycle, where clothes are cheap and relatively easy to purchase, which consequently causes clothing to become disposable. How does being a second-hand influencer contradict an influencer's main role? Influencers using one-off products contradicts a main influencer role to drive traffic towards a product and increase sales. Influencers expect their posts to direct as many people as possible to the featured products and initiate numerous sales. However, second-hand influencers cannot show purchase patterns, causing difficulty for brands to work with them as they do not produce sales. This leads to a disruption of the ordinary pattern of influencers and brands working together. Fashion influencers or lifestyle influencers. Second-hand influencers are not selling a physical product that can produce purchase patterns or algorithms. Instead, they are producing ideals of recycling and patterns of reduced consumption, indicating that they are in fact defined as lifestyle influencers. A second-hand influencer's goal is for their audience to aspire to achieve the second-hand influencer's lifestyle through repeating the second-hand influencer's purchasing pattern. However, they still need to look at how they can make money to keep practicing. The downsides of second-hand influencing. Even though second-hand influencers promote more sustainable ways of consumption, they are still promoting consumption. Second-hand influencers are not affecting the amount of new clothing that is still being produced, nor the fashion industry's model. Instead, influencers attempt to reduce fast fashion's impact. Therefore, second-hand influencers should promote the consumption of second-hand and sustainable clothing, alongside promoting re-wearing already owned clothing, successfully seen through the #OwnClothesOctober campaign on Instagram, where second-hand influencers promoted new looks styled every day from already owned clothing, much like how consumers dress every day. Conclusion. Overall, my findings have shown that second-hand influencers can be viable and change consumption of second-hand clothing, as evidenced through the popularity of campaigns like #SecondhandSeptember. However, I propose that moving forward, second-hand influencers should focus on both lifestyle and fashion in order to improve the effectiveness of their influence. My research has shown that second-hand influencers are not fully sustainable through indirectly promoting fast fashion and the use of postage and packaging. Many of these influences, however, do increase the consumption of second-hand garments, reducing the amount of clothing thrown into landfills. I also propose that charity Instagrams need to be professionalised to increase their effectiveness, to increase participation from consumers and influencers. If second-hand influencers succeed in stopping fast fashion being produced, it would cause vast social and economic problems around the world. However, it would benefit the environment. Therefore, it would be more successful to only produce clothing that can serve multiple cycles in the second-hand system. Consumers should then continue to mix these with already owned and second-hand clothing. Thank you for listening.